Hello everyone, welcome back to the session. So in the previous classes, we have discussed about the CUET PG exam 2026 question pattern as well as the syllabus analysis for zoology. Okay, so we are having 60 days of target. Okay, so in this 60 days, let me explain. Let me give you a short note on how our session will be. Okay, so we are going to discuss about the zoology and the exam will be the CUET PG for the upcoming exam. Okay. So in this 60 days, I will take you one topic, one most important topic each day. Okay. So in all the units, so what are all the units we have discussed before? Okay. So in each day, we are going to discuss about one topic in one chapter. So in that topic, we are going to discuss the topic from top to bottom as well as we are going to solve 10 MCQs. Okay. This is how in these 60 days we are going to carry the session. Okay, so just keep in mind each day each topic. Okay, so each day one topic, and in that topic we are going to discuss 10 MCQ, and that concepts as well as the MCQs will be strictly based on the CUET PG exam. Okay. Now, so in that line, in today, this is the first day of our class regarding the CUET PG exam. So in this day, we are going to discuss about the cell biology chapter. Okay. So for the first few days, we are going to deal with the cell biology chapter, the most important topics regarding that unit. So in that case, in today, we are going to discuss about the cell theory and what are all the exceptions to this cell theory, as well as what are all the cell size and what will be the cell shape, and some of the MCQs. We are going to discuss about that. Okay. So without any delay, the first thing will be cell theory. What is meant by cell theory, and what will be the classical cell theory, and what is the modern cell theory? So this is the most important thing. So when it comes to the cell theory, you should know who proposed the cell theory. Okay, with respect to plants, animals. Okay, and what the cell theory will be proposed of. Okay. See, so this is the classical theory. The classical theory has been accepted between 1838 to 1855. Okay, so this in these years. So classical theory was accepted by most of the scientists. Okay, and that classical theory was proposed by Matthias Leiden in case of plants. Theodor Swan, okay, that is in case of animals. So that is how the Sladen and Swan, okay. So who proposed this cell theory means it always the scientist name will be the Sladen and Swan. Okay. So Sladen in case of plants and Swan in case of animals. Okay. So who is Rudolf Virchow? Okay. So he identified the cell which is in the cork, that is cell dead cells. Okay. Cork. So that has been this is how the cell will be. Okay. So that was the structure was identified by the Rudolf Virchow. Okay. So this is what a classical cell theory, and these are all the scientists who proposed the cell theory. Okay. Now, what is exactly the cell theory? These scientists have proposed what are all the definitions under the cell theory. Okay. So, see, these are all important statements. The straight line can be expected in the questions. Okay. See, all living organisms are composed of cell. Okay, cell is the structural and functional unit of life. This is the classical definition we have been used to over these years for cell. Okay, see, the first statement will be all living organisms are made up of cell. Okay, each and every organs in our body is made up of a cell. Okay, so cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. Okay, so these are all important statements regarding the cell. And the third important thing will be all cells arise from the pre-existing cells, which means what? There is an old cell will be there. From this cell, a new cell has been arised. Okay, so that's what all cells arise from the pre-existing cell. So this is an important statement, and this statement, the Rudolf Virchow has been stated the statement as omnis cellulae cellula. Okay, so this is what an important statement. So the three important classical statements will be, the first statement is all living organisms are composed of cell. Cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. And the third important statement will be all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. So these three statements are very, very important statements. Okay. Now, The third, the most important things. First, we have studied about which a scientist proposed the cell theory and what are all the statements coming under cell theory. Now we have to understand what will be the limitations of classical cell theory that gives a way forward for the arise of this modern theory. Okay. Now what are all the limitations? See, so these cell theory could not explain about viruses. They explain about plants and they have explained about animals, but they couldn't explain about viruses. Okay, because virus are considered as an acellular entities. Okay. So next, they did not explain the origin of first cell. See, the third statement have been explaining that all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. No doubt in that, all the cells are existing from the arise from the pre-existing cells only. Then who produced the first cell? See, so I have explained you that this is the cell gives rise to another cell. Okay, and this is the cell gives rise to another cell. Now who produced this first cell? So this cell theory, classical cell theory, didn't explain the first cell origin. Okay. Now, that which means what? They didn't explain the origin of cell, or origin of first cell, in the sense they didn't explain the concept of abiogenesis, which means from non-living organic matter, living cell has been originated. They didn't explain the concept of abiogenesis. And the third important limitation will be they could not explain the multinucleate condition. Okay, see, they didn't explain the multinucleate condition, which means what? In each cell, one nucleus will be there. This is what a classical cell theory. In one cell, many nucleus can be present, and that is called as a syncytium. Okay, they didn't explain the concept of syncytium. Okay, so see, so we have studied about the scientists regarding the cell theory and what are all the statements coming under the cell theory. Now we have explained the limitations. What are all the limitations of the cell theory? Okay, see, they didn't explain the concept of viruses, that is acellular. They didn't explain about the acellular entities, and they didn't explain the origin of first cell, that is they didn't explain the concept of abiogenesis, and they could not explain the concept of multinucleate condition, that is the syncytium. Okay, now these are all the limitations made the scientists to think, and there is an arise of the evolution of this modern cell theory. Now what is meant by this modern cell theory? Okay, see, modern cell theory, additional, so all the classical cell theory statements are true. Okay, all the statements which is coming under the cell theory have been true, because all living organisms are made up of cell, and each and every the cell is a structural and functional unit of living of life. That is a true statement, and all the cells are arise from the pre-existing cells. All the three statements are correct with respect to the classical cell theory. Now, what are all the additional statements which has been satisfied the limitations of the classical cell theory? So that is what a modern cell theory. What are all the additional statements? Cell contain a hereditary information, that may be RNA or DNA. Any hereditary information has been stored in the cells. Okay, so there is an hereditary information. Each cell contains some nucleic acids, and that nucleic acid is the storehouse of the hereditary information. That information will be passed from the one cell to another cell during the division. So this is the most important point in the modern cell theory. And the second important statements will be all metabolic reactions occurs within a cell. Okay, which means what? All the catabolism and the anabolism process, all the metabolism process will be happening in case of cells, because inside the cells we are having a nucleus which contains genetic material, and we are having a cytoplasm, we are having an endoplasmic reticulum, lysosomes, ribosomes, and we are having a peroxisomes. We are having most of the important cellular organelles which is doing all the physiological functions necessary to work the body. Okay, so this is what all the metabolic reactions occurs within the cell only. All these cells together make up the life. Okay, now each cells have a similar basic chemical composition. One cell having a similar basic cellular chemical composition, Another cell is also having a similar chemical composition. It is not that one cell is made up of a different chemical composition, another cell is not made up of different composition. All the cells in our body is made up of a similar chemical composition. So this is another important point coming under the modern cell theory. Now, the energy flow, that is the metabolism process, occurs within the cells. This is the most important point. That is why we are saying that each cell is like a chemical factory, because all the important metabolisms will be taking place inside the cells. Okay. See, in the classical cell theory, we have studied about all living organisms are made up of cells. Cell is a structural and functional unit of life. All the cells are arised from the pre-existing cells. Okay. Now, what are all the modern cell theory? What is the additional statements? They are having a hereditary information that passed from one cell to another cell during the division, and all metabolic. This division is nothing but a meiotic division and mitotic division. We are going to discuss about that too. Okay, all metabolic reactions occurs within the cells only. Cells having a similar basic chemical composition and energy flow, that is a metabolism, will be occurs within the cells. Okay. Now, what is the difference between, what is the comparison between this classical and modern theory? Okay. See, the classical theory focus only on the structure. But here in the modern theory, they are focusing on they are not only focusing on the structure, but also the molecules present inside the cell and what are all the functions done by the cell and its cell organelles. Okay. Now, they didn't relate the cell with respect to the genetics. But here in the modern theory, they have explained as the first statement itself, each cell has a hereditary information, that is the DNA. They are defining the cell with respect to the genetic level also. Now, they didn't connect the cell with respect to this metabolism in case of classical cell theory, but in modern cell theory, they have explained about the metabolism process also. Each cell is having a similar chemical composition, and based on the chemical composition, metabolism process is also taking place inside the cell. This is what a major comparison between the classical cell theory and the modern cell theory. Okay, next step. What are all the exceptions to this cell theory? Okay, both will be the classical as well as the modern cell theory. Some of the exemptions, whatever be the theory, whatever be the law, whatever be the fact is, there is always some exception. Okay. Now, what are all the exemptions to the cell theory? And the first one will be the virus. Okay, virus, this is the most important exemption. Why? Because, why viruses are the exceptions? Why? Because it is acellular. Why it is considered as an acellular? Because, see, it doesn't mean it is not a cell. Okay, see, it is acellular. Why it is considered as an acellular? Because there will be no cell membrane present here. Okay, there is no cytoplasm, no ribosomes present. So these are all the most important structures with respect to the cell. As these important structures are missing in the virus, they are considered as an acellular. Okay, now this inert outside the host, which means inside the host they are living, outside the host they are non-living. So that is why we are calling this particular virus as an obligate parasite, obligate microorganism. Okay, because inside the host they are acting as a viruses living organism, outside the host they are inert, they are non-living. Okay, so they replicate only inside the host cells. Only whenever it enter into any of the body, it will be active and it will be replicate, it can multiply their population. So this is why viruses are considered as an exceptions. But this is also contain a genetic material. Okay, this is also having a genetic material. Either it will be a DNA or RNA. They are having a genetic material. They show life-like properties only inside the host. They are also alive only whenever they are inside the host. Okay, now what are all the exam may trap you? Okay, some statements in the exam may trap you. This is how the viruses are at the borderline of living and the non-living. So this is an important statement. Okay. Now, another important exemptions will be the syncytium. Okay, so see, the syncytium is considered as a multinucleate cell. Each cell only one nucleus will be there, but in a cell, if there is a many nucleus, that structure is called as a syncytium. Okay, see, there is a single cell, only one cell that has many nuclei, but no internal boundaries. See, just listen to me. So this is a cell. This is a nucleus. This is how one normal cell will be. But in a syncytium, there will be a one cell which has many nucleus and there will be no boundaries. Okay, there will be no boundaries. It will be just like that, float in the cytoplasm. So this is what a syncytium, a multinucleate cell. Okay, so what are all the very important examples? So in our body, do we have any syncytium cell? Of course there is. Okay, where we can see these type of multinucleate cells. Say for an example, in the skeletal muscle fibers, it is multinucleate. Okay, so it is a multinucleate in the skeletal muscle fibers. The certain fungal hyphae, okay, fungal hyphae, they are also having a multinucleus. Placental tissue, syncytiotropoblast. So this is called as a syncytiotropoblast as it is present in the placental tissue. So these are all the area where we can see the multinucleate cells. Okay, so this is very important. Why it is violating the cell theory? Because cell theory didn't give a proper definition for this syncytium. See, so in the classical or the modern cell theory, each cell there has to be one cell, one nucleus that has to be there. Okay, but in syncytium there is one cell, but inside a cell there is many nucleus will be there. So it is violating the cell theory. Syncytium has many nuclei in one cell and cell theory assumes only one nucleus per cell. So this is the reason it is an exemption to the cell theory. Okay. Now, another important example will be the coenocytic organisms. See, coenocytic organisms, what is the difference between the syncytium and coenocytic? See, syncytium is a sense there is a fusion of a cells. See, fusion of a cells, they are having a many nucleus, but there will be no boundaries with each and every nucleus. Okay, but coenocyte will be the nuclear division without cytokinesis. There will be no cytokinesis, will be cytokinesis in the sense cytoplasmic division. Okay, so cytoplasmic division, cytoplasm here will not be divided. A common cytoplasm, nuclear is getting divided. Okay. What are all the best example for the coenocytic organisms? Coenocytic organisms are algae like Eucharia. Okay, so this is the best example, and here cytoplasm not divided after the nuclear division. So nuclear division is technically called as a karyokinesis and the cytoplasm is technically called as the cytokinesis. Okay, always the karyokinesis followed by the cytokinesis, but here in coenocytic the nuclear has been divided. This karyokinesis has been completed, but it is not followed by the cytokinesis, which means the cytokinesis will not be taking place in the coenocytic organism. So this is very important statement. Okay, you should not confuse this term with the syncytium. Okay, both are different. In the syncytium there is a considered as a fusion of cells. Okay, in the coenocytic here the nuclear division will be taking place, but no cytokinesis will be there. Now, with respect to the cell size, okay, how can we define the cell size? Okay, why cells are very small? Okay, why cells are very small? Surface area to the volume ratio. Okay, surface area. Whenever we are considering the size, we have to consider their volume as well as the surface area. Okay, see, consider this is a square. Okay, so this outside layer is called as a surface area. The inner capacity is called as a volume. Okay, so this is what a surface area to volume ratio. Okay, see, in smaller cells, they are having a higher surface area when compared to the volume. Higher surface area to volume ratio. Okay, so this is what an efficient diffusion. And in case of larger cells, the diffusion becomes slow. Okay, so in case of a smaller cells, there is an efficient diffusion. In case of a larger cells, here there will be a slow diffusion will be taking place. What is the main difference? See, let me explain you very clearly. See, there is a smaller cells. What does mean by a larger cells? Okay, if it is a smaller sized cells, their surface area will be higher, and their wall, when compared to their volume, their surface area will be higher. So that with the diffusion rate, diffusion in the sense those gases we can easily cross this layer. Okay, if the surface area will be higher, the diffusion rate will be higher. Okay, in the largest size, the surface area will be smaller when compared to the volume. Then the diffusion rate will be slow. Okay, so this is a very important statement. How in the exam they can ask the question: increase in cell size, decrease the surface area to volume ratio. So if there will be more cell size, their surface area will be lower and the diffusion ratio will be lower. If the smaller size, the surface area will be higher, the diffusion rate is also higher. That is why the cell size will be smaller. Okay, the main reason why the cells are small is the higher surface area to the volume ratio. Okay, so this is the most important thing. Okay, now typical cell sizes, which means what will be the size of a bacteria, what will be the RBC cell, that is red blood cell, what will be the size of a human ovum, what will be the size of nerve cell, what will be the size of ostrich egg. See, in the bacteria, the size of a cell will be, that will be 1 to 5 micrometer. In the RBC, that will be approximately 7.5 micrometer. In the human ovum, this will be approximately 100 micrometer. 100 mu meter. Okay, so this is what a largest cell. Okay, and this is the nerve cell. This is also a longest. See, there is a difference between largest and longest. Longest in the sense this is the longest, so the nerve cell will be like this, longest cell. Largest means like this. Okay, largest cell, this is the longest cell. Ostrich is the largest single cell. Okay, so based on these cell sizes, the question can be asked. That leads to confusion. Let me explain you when I am explaining the questions. Okay, so this is what a typical cell sizes. Now, see, most common MCQs will be largest cell. Largest cell will be the human ovum. The longest cell will be the nerve cell. So this is very important. Now, cell shape. Okay, so this is how this shape of a cell will be. See, the cell shape is related to the function. See, you should know the size. I have explained you why the cell size is very small. Now, the cell shape is different based on their function. So, based on the shape, the function is also, based on the function, the shape is also getting varied. So, this is also very, very important. See, based the RBC, we are having a red blood cells and they are having a function of oxygen carrying capacity. So for carrying of oxygen, all the cells are in need of oxygen always. Okay, so that one RBC has to carry most of the oxygen so that it will be sufficient for all the cells to get their oxygen. Okay, so that is why the shape of RBC will be biconcave like this. Okay, so as it is a biconcave, their volume will be higher. Okay, well, their surface area will be higher. Okay, as the surface area will be higher, the diffusion of oxygen rate is also higher. So that is why the shape called the biconcave. It leads in the efficient oxygen transport. Okay, now what will be the neuron shape? Okay, so it will be long. Okay, so this is what a neuron shape. Okay, so there is a dendrite cell body, this is an axon, this is an axon terminal. All these will be the structure of the neuron. It is long as it is branched. Okay, why it has to branch? Because it has to receive the signals. Okay, the main function of the neuron will be it has to take the signal and it has to reach the brain. Okay, so signal transmission, it has been long. Okay, so now the muscle cell. Muscle cells, they are in an elongated state. Okay, why it has to be elongated shape? Because it involves in the function of contraction and relaxation. Okay, so that is why it is in an elongated shape. Amoeba, it will be irregular. Why it has to be irregular? Because it will be helpful for the function to perform the phagocytosis process. Okay, so based on the function, the shape of each and every cell has been varied. Okay, now So the most important exam point of in an exam point of view, we can expect a question. Virus is not a cell, as we have mentioned before. Virus is acellular. Virus is not a cell. Of course, it is a true statement. Okay. Now, all living organisms are cellular. Okay. See, if they have explained, if they have given you a statement, all living organisms are cellular, that statement is false statement. Why? Because not all living organisms are cellular, because virus inside the virus, when it enter into the host cell, it will be living and it will be cellular. Okay, it is acellular in nature, so that is why not all living organisms are cellular. Okay, there is an exemption. Now, see, the largest cell is called as an ostrich egg. Okay, see, ostrich egg is largest, of course it is right. But in human, whether ostrich egg is the largest one? No, human ovum is the largest cell. So this can be a wrong statement. Now, syncytium violates the classical cell theory. Why? Because syncytium is a multinucleate cell. In case of classical cell theory, each cell one nucleus. Okay, that is what a statement coming under the classical cell theory. And in case of syncytium, it is a multinucleate cell, so that it violates the classical cell theory. It is a right statement. Now, the cell theory does not explain the origin of first cell. Of course, it does not explain the origin of first cell, as we have discussed before, as the limitations of classical cell theory. So these are all the common exam traps, right? Now, so that's all about the basic informations about the cell theory. Now, let us deal with the MCQs. Okay. So the first statement will be, which statement is not a part of the modern cell theory? Take pause the video, okay, and try to answer the question. Okay. So which statement is not a part of the modern cell theory? The first statement will be, all cells arise from the pre-existing cells. Cells contains the hereditary information. Energy flow occurs within the cells. All living organisms are cellular. Here, they didn't explain about the classical cell theory. They explain about the modern cell theory, and which statements are not a part of the modern cell theory. Okay. Let me show you an answer. See, virus are acellular. Hence, not all living organisms are cellular. This is a classic trap. Okay, so this is very, very, very important. Okay, so which is not a part of a modern cell theory will be this. All living organisms are cellular. Okay, so this is also right. The cell, because these are all extension points of this modern cell theory. Okay, all this modern cell theory is also explaining all cells are arise from the pre-existing cells. Cells contains the hereditary information. Energy flows within the cells. That is the metabolism. And all living organisms or cellular is not a part of the modern cell theory. Okay. Now, virus violates the cell theory primarily because virus is not obeying the cell theory. The primary reason why. Okay, the first option will be, it lacks the metabolic enzymes. Okay, as there is no enzymes for doing the metabolism process, virus is violating the cell theory. It lacks the ribosomes and cytoplasm. So this is what the explanation, and does not possess a genetic material, and it cannot reproduce. What are all the main important reason that virus violating the cell theory? Okay, let me show you an answer. Option B. See, virus do not have a genetic material and it will reproduce inside the host, but it is lacking the cellular organization. Like, see, they didn't have a ribosomes, they didn't have cytoplasm, they didn't have a cell membrane. Okay, but they do not reproduce. Of course, they are reproduced. They reproduce inside the host. Okay, they are having a genetic material. They are also having an enzymes. But this is the reason as it is violating the cell theory. So this is the most important statement. Now, which of the following conditions best explain why large cells divide? Okay, which of the following conditions best explains why large cells divide? Increased metabolic rate, decreased surface area to volume ratio, increased diffusion rate. Why the cells are very small? as it has to higher surface area to volume ratio, so that the diffusion rate will be higher. Okay, in the larger cells the surface area will be lower. The surface area will be lower, so that the diffusion rate is also lower. So this is what a basic difference why the largest cells are divided. So what will be the correct answer for this question? Answer C. As the cell size increases, the surface area to volume ratio will be decreases. So the diffusion becomes inefficient. So the cell division is favorable only for the division of small cells. So that is why when the cell size will be reaching certain size, the cell is reaching certain size, automatically it will leads to the cell division. Okay, so this is the very important point. So the answer will be, so why large cells are divided, as it is decreasing the surface area to volume ratio. So this is the correct answer for this question. Now, the fourth question will be, which structure is responsible for violating the assumption one nucleus per cell in classical cell theory? See, classical cell theory proposed that for one cell, only one nucleus will be there. This is what a classical cell theory proposes. Okay. Now, which of the following structure is violating the cell theory? Okay. So, coenocyte, syncytium, multicellular tissue and protoplasm. What will be the right answer? So the right answer will be the syncytium. So as we have studied before, syncytium will be the multinucleate single cell that is present in the skeletal muscle. So this is the one violating the statements of classical cell theory. Okay. Now, which pair is incorrectly matched? Okay, which pair is incorrectly matched? The longest cell neuron, is this the right match? Largest human cell, it is a ovum. Again, it will be a right match. And this is the largest cell overall ostrich egg. So this is Baden wash. And the smallest living cell will be the virus. Okay. We know these two statements are correct. Okay. And which is incorrectly matched? Always we can eliminate two options very easily. To eliminate the remaining two options, we have to study. Okay. So this is the main important thing. So the virus is not a cell. Overall, of course, see, overall, ostrich egg will be the largest when compared to the human ovum. But in human, which is the most largest cell in the sense, ovum is the largest cell. Okay, the smallest virus is not the smallest cell. In the smallest cell will be the mycoplasma. Okay. So another important question, a cell with multiple nuclei formed due to nuclear division without cytokinesis is best described as. So another important thing, you have to know that a cell there will be a multiple nuclei. We know that a cell with a multiple nuclei will be the syncytium. Okay, cell with a multiple nuclei is a syncytium. But we are having a difference between the syncytium and coenocyte. So in the syncytium will be the fusion of cells. Coenocyte will be, they are having a nuclear division but they are not having a cytokinesis. So the answer for this question will be the coenocyte. Coenocyte will be a repeated nuclear division without a cell division. Okay, the best example will be the algae. So this is very important thing. Now, the next important question will be, which statement best differentiates the syncytium from the coenocyte? Syncytium occurs only in the plant cell. So this is the wrong statement. Why? Because syncytium is also present in the human. Example, the skeletal muscle. Coenocyte has a membrane-bound nuclei. Syncytium is formed by the fusion of cells. Coenocyte lacks cytoplasm. So what will be the best differentiation between the syncytium and coenocyte in the sense? It means syncytium is formed by the fusion of cells. It will be the right statement. Okay. So instead of, it is a fusion of the syncytium will be the fusion of cells and coenocyte will be the formation of nuclear cell division, not the cytokinesis. Okay. So this is very important statement. Now, biconcave shape of the RBC is primarily associated with, see, the shape of the RBC will be the biconcave. Okay, so why this shape of RBC will be the biconcave? What it is, its function. Okay, reduce the diffusion distance, increased surface area, increased volume, decreased hemoglobin content. Okay, ultimately our increased surface area leads to larger diffusion. So this is what a concept we have studied, why the cell sizes are very smaller. So what is with respect to RBC in the sense? So that is the main reason. So biconcave shape, maximum surface area for efficient diffusion, for efficient exchange of gases. So this is a most important reason why the RBC cells are biconcave in nature. Now, so which statement correctly reflects a modern interpretation of the cell theory? See, they are having the they are asking about the modern cell theory. Okay, so which will be the correct interpretation? Metabolism occurs only in the specialized cells. Cells differ in chemical composition. DNA is genetic unit transmitted during the cell division. Cell theory explains the origin of first cell. So these are all the statements which is correctly interpreting the model cell theory. What will be the first statement? That will be a metabolism occurs only in the specialized cells. Is it right? No, metabolism occurs in all the cells. And chemical cells differs in chemical composition. Opposite is wrong statement. Cells, it is not different in the chemical composition. DNA is the genetic unit transmitted during the cell division. Of course, it is a right interpretation. Cell theory doesn't explain the origin of first cell, so the correct answer will be option C. Okay. DNA inheritance is the modern addition. Origin of first cell is not explained even in the modern cell theory. Okay. So this is an important statement. Kindly have a note of it. Okay, why is a neuron exceptionally long without increasing its diameter significantly? Why neuron is exceptionally long? Why? Why? What is the main reason? To increase the surface area to volume ratio, to decrease the resistance, to store more cytoplasm, to increase the metabolism rate. See, always to increase the surface area to volume will be the main reason so that the diffusion, it may be effectively do its function. So that is what an important reason why the long shape without bulk maintains efficient diffusion and signaling. So this is the most important reason. Okay, so this in today's class, this is the first day of the class regarding the CUET PG exam. So in this class, we have discussed about the what is cell, what is meant by cell theory, what are all the exemptions to the cell theory, what is the difference between the classical and modern cell theory. Also, we have solved 10 important questions which is not deviating from the CUET exam. Okay, hope you find useful the session. So we'll meet you in the next class. Okay, with different topic in the same cell biology chapter. Okay, thank you so much.